thing is certain. War has returned to Crone.
Oh, God's truth. Look at him. It's so beautiful. The Emperor's shield is in Dawn of War. Oh my God. Welcome home, Dad.
The galaxy lies shattered. The Blood Ravens stand alone. We fight. We bleed. We die. For centuries, we have been sworn to defend Kronos. We have returned to find a world in ruin. Orc warlords infest the surface. Mechanicus priests pursue knowledge long forgotten. Ancient horrors awaken, claiming dominion over all. And something still stirs below. Buried deep, lost for eons, and never meant to return. We stand defiant. Kronos must not fall. And we are not alone. Is untold. Only one thing is certain. War has returned to Kronos.
Really quite something, isn't it, ladies and gentlemen? The return of Lionel Johnson was one of the biggest events we've ever seen in Warhammer 40k, but it occurs to me that not everybody who plays Dawn of War will understand what this is about. So I thought it would be a good idea to do a stream explaining why I had a relatively strong reaction to seeing my Primarch on the screen for the first time. And I've taken a day. I've calmed down, and we can approach this properly and rationally. So obviously this is the greatest thing to ever have happened. The fact that the Primarch is in a game is just incredible in and of itself, but I thought it would be a really good idea to take a look at the Lion story a little bit and explain why even just that trailer in and of itself is making me feel so many things and so many wondrous emotions. So, who is Lionel Johnson is the first question we might be wondering. Lionel Johnson is a Primarch, a son of the Master of Mankind. The sons of the Emperor are literal demigods to you and I. The Lion is not just a Primarch, however. He is said to be the first Primarch. And in the lore, it's actually said that the reason he's the first Primarch is important. For number one isn't just a number in Warhammer 40k. It is said that the Emperor made him for a specific reason, and that reason might very well determine the future of the entire setting. The Lion was one of the most impressive Primarchs, to the degree that even though he was famously stoic, taciturn, and quite frankly a bit of a dick at times, well through the Great Crusade and into the Heresy, most of the other Primarchs couldn't help but admire him. We have a fantastic moment in the Horus Heresy where Rabute Guilliman, the only other Primarch as of yet to have returned, when he sees Lionel Johnson is returning, he says that of all of the Primarchs, there were only two he ever truly looked up to, only two he ever truly admired, and they were Horus Lupercal, who turned against the Emperor, and Lion L. Johnson. And these two Primarchs do not get on, so it is quite a big deal that even though Roboute Guilliman basically dislikes this man, the Lion is so impressive as a warrior and as a commander that you just can't really help but love him. Like all of the Loyalist Primarchs, by the time we get to Warhammer 40k, he's gone. We haven't seen any of the Primarchs for nigh on 10,000 years. Half of the Primarchs turned against the Emperor of Mankind and joined their brother Horus in rebellion, and then of the 9 that remained loyal to the Master of Mankind, some died and most were just lost. They just disappeared and we don't know what happened to them. The Primarch Roboute Guilliman of the Ultramarines was the first Primarch to return at the start of the era Indomitus, but Lionel Johnson is the second Primarch to return, and that is the big current storyline ongoing in Warhammer 40k. And that's immediately one of the reasons this game is going to be quite big, is that we're straight away jumping in to one of the biggest plot lines in Warhammer. And to show you how drastic this is, one of the single greatest complaints I get doing this is the fact that so many people are quite annoyed about the fact that we haven't seen the Lion since his return, really. When he returned, he got a novel, he got a mention in another novel, and then he got a campaign series. But that was about 3 years ago, and we haven't seen him much at all since then. He appears in the codexes, he's mentioned there, but that's really about it. But everybody is mentioned in the codexes. So people have been very concerned for a long time that Games Workshop, who own Warhammer, they brought back this incredible character and then basically did nothing with him. Now that Lionel Johnson has returned, we can actually start to move forward with some of the big plot lines that we're wanting to see for the Dark Angels. So in the most recent Dark Angels Codex, we actually get to take a look at what kind of things the Lion has been doing since he returned. And it goes into some really interesting detail. So the Lion, like all of the Dark Angels, he lives on their fortress monastery known as the Rock, which is basically a chunk of the planet of Caliban, their homeworld, which was destroyed during the Dark Angels' kind of civil war. And the Rock is the largest remnant of it, and it's got big engines strapped to it. It's basically just a comet that they kind of fly through space, and it's also got a remaining part of a castle called Alderuk, which used to exist upon the planet. And so he, like all of the Dark Angels, lives in this floating fortress that goes throughout space. And within the Rock, it is said he has 2 chambers from which he will conduct meetings, and one of them, of course, is a secret chamber. He has one secret chamber that is deep within the Rock, and it's in the part of the Rock where all of the Watchers in the Dark live. And it's in this chamber where he holds his true meetings. Now, what's really interesting is that the Codex talks about this idea that, yes, the Lion will bring in Azrael, bring in Belial, his most famous sons, and the leaders within the Dark Angels chapter, and he'll have meetings with them, and they'll decide what they're going to do next. But he also takes a lot of time on his own talking to seemingly himself. People that will walk past this chamber will hear the Lion talking to people, and he can hear murmured voices, and then when the Lion beckons them to come into the room, there's no one inside. And so we do know that Lionel Johnson has been working on something big in secret and conducting missions across the galaxy. The other reason we know this is because when Lionel Johnson returned, we see him develop this kind of forest walking ability, which tragically we don't see in the trailer. I wish we got to see that. But he has this ability where basically he can kind of jump in and out of this pocket dimension, and jumping in and out of dimensions is basically how you travel at speeds faster than light in 40k. He has his own little dimension, which we call Mirror Caliban. It's a mirror reflection of his old homeworld, and when he goes into this Mirror Caliban, he can walk down these forest paths and then pop out in another part of the galaxy. And so he does this quite often, apparently, and goes on basically quests. He's just this questing knight. He is known as the Knight of Nihilus because he is the Primarch that defends half of the Imperium, known as Imperium Nihilus. And within that half of the Imperium, he's just taking out Chaos Warlords, Xenos threats, helping not just Dark Angels and successive chapters, but also just like any humanity that needs help. He is the sworn defender of humanity. That's basically his role now. He is largely kind of disgusted with what the Imperium has become today. He doesn't like the fact, of course, so many within the Imperium worship his father as a god, but he is kind of accepting of it, and he is determined to save humanity. So he goes on this forest walking trips. Sometimes he takes some of his sons with him, and they go on all of these crazy quests. So bringing the Lion into the Dawn of War game is pretty perfect because we know basically why he will have done this. This will be connected to some sort of quest that the Lion is working on. Now, interestingly, there are 3 great tasks kind of that are given to the Lion when the Lion returned to Warhammer 40K. We don't know exactly what they are, but we do know that they have the Emperor gave kind of 3 symbols. The Emperor took a form known as the Fisher King, and when the Lion met this Fisher King in this kind of Mirror Caliban, he laid these 3 items before the Lion. There was a chalice, there was a spear, and there was a candelabra. And so these 3 symbols likely infer to the Lion what the Emperor wants him to accomplish. And perhaps one of them is connected to this. The Blood Ravens do have blood connections. Maybe the chalice is related to them. Who knows? But we will see likely a great expansion on the Lion's lore in this novel, because like I say, since he returned, we haven't had a lot on him, and just kind of the interactions between the Lion and non-Dark Angels chapters is always going to be fascinating, because during the Heresy, like I say, the Lion was famously a bit tough to work with. And so the fact that Lionel Johnson is now back and better than ever, and seeing him, like even in that chapter, seeing that Deathwing Terminator reach out his hand to lift up a Blood Raven is a big deal, because the Dark Angels have the reputation of not really ever helping anybody without helping themselves. And so even just that trailer made me feel like, oh, we're in a new realm of the Dark Angels now, which is pretty cool, and I think something that all Dark Angels fans wanted to see. He's avoiding Guilliman. Well, so as far as we know, he's not avoiding Guilliman. He's just not determined to go back to Imperium Sanctus. This is the big difference between the two. Whereas Rabute Guilliman, immediately upon returning, headed to Terra and had a meeting with his father, a meeting which would prove pretty critical to Guilliman's plot development. The Lion, when he comes back, he initially has the same idea. He thinks, all right, I've got to go back. I've got to find out if the Emperor is still alive. What's the situation with Terra? What's going on? And then after the events of his story, when he returns in Lionel Johnson, Son of the Forest, he actually relinquishes this idea and is determined now to remain in Imperium Nihilus, protect as much of the realm as possible, and basically try and safeguard humanity in this incredibly dark time. And so it's not that he's avoiding Guilliman so much, it's just he's basically taken an oath, really, as such, to protect as much of humanity as possible, which is pretty cool. And if you're familiar with the Lion in the Heresy, you'll know this is very unlike him. The Lion was constantly one of the Primarchs who sought to be in command of his other brothers. He was a regular contestant for the title of War Master, essentially like the head out of all of the Primarchs, and he constantly sought that position. And so the fact that he now no longer seeks any position of authority, he doesn't seek to replace Guilliman, he doesn't seek to bring Guilliman down, is a pretty big change in his character, because we would in the Heresy, when he sees Rabute Guilliman consolidating his position within Ultramar, he actually accuses Guilliman of heresy, or near enough. So it's a big deal to see the Lion basically not make a mad scramble for power. Anyway, sci-fi, hello. Blood Ravens confirmed First Legion gene stock. Unfortunately, I don't think the Blood Ravens are going to be Dark Angels. So the Blood Ravens are a pretty mysterious chapter. They are one of the chapters, like you say, that doesn't have an official gene sire. They're, as far as we know, they are an unknown founding, right? And so we don't know which legion they descend from, and that's relatively common in a lot of Warhammer 40k chapters, and it's a very popular plotline behind quite a few of the most popular chapters within the setting. And with the Blood Ravens, we know a little bit both in universe and out of universe. Out of universe, it is said that the Blood Ravens are descended from the Word Bearers. The Word Bearers are the sons of Lorgar, Aurelia, and some of the most disgusting traitors in the entire galaxy. And their homeworld is called Aurelia. Their armor is like blood red. They are exceptionally psychically powerful, which is pretty in line with Word Bearers. Word Bearers do have very powerful psykers, and they are obsessed with knowledge, which is pretty much in line with Word Bearers. And in the earlier Blood Raven Dawn of War games, we do see traitor Blood Ravens, again pretty in line with what we'd expect for the Word Bearers. So the idea that the Blood Ravens are Word Bearers is pretty in keeping with the setting. The most obvious answer, like in universe, I'll be honest, what I always assumed it was, is they are sons of Magnus the Red, mainly because there are so many psykers within their ranks. That's sort of what it doesn't come up so much in the games, but it largely defines the Blood Ravens in the lore, is that they have so many psykers. They're so psychically powerful. They are far more librarians than any other chapter, and they have so many librarians that they have a rank within their chapter called Captain Librarian Captain, I think, and you can actually, that used to be something you could play in the game, and it's a pretty big deal because psykers are incredibly rare within Warhammer 40k, and so it likely suggested that they were sons of Magnus the Red. In addition to that, there is a comment from one of the Thousand Sons that there were some Raven sons of Magnus who weren't caught by either Lehman Russ or the Rubric, and so it always sort of suggested that perhaps the Blood Ravens left Prospero early, which we do know some Thousand Sons did leave Prospero and therefore weren't, caught by Lehman Russ. And it also tells us that somehow they would have been protected from the Rubric of Ahriman, which turned so many within their legion into the mindless automata of the Rubrici. So how they would have been protected is kind of the bigger of the two questions, I guess. But either answer is pretty cool. And it's one of those things, it's always going to be a bit controversial. Some people will say you should just leave it in the mystery, but to us finding out who their gene sire is could lead to some pretty cool lore development. If it was either one of them, it's going to be wild. Now, the Lion meeting the Blood Ravens is a pretty cool development for them, because one of the things about Lionel Johnson since his return is the Lion has had to deal with the fact that half of his sons, we don't know exactly percentage-wise, but a lot of his sons basically turned against the Imperium. They then tricked a bunch of other Dark Angels into believing that the Lion had turned against the Imperium, and that is why we see this civil war break out on Caliban. So when the Lion returns, he has to meet his sons and basically sniff out whether they're the ones that have fallen to chaos or not. And in addition to that, some of the Dark Angels who were tricked, in the time since they were tricked, they have fallen to chaos. Now, if the Lion is perfectly placed to do this, because the Lion has an innate ability, one of those abilities I talked about earlier, where he can basically sniff out chaos within people. And so if he sniffs out chaos within one of his sons, he'll execute them. But if he doesn't sniff out chaos, he'll allow them to live. Now, the Blood Ravens, as I say, quite obsessed with achieving power in some of the old books. And one of the things that Gabriel Angelos, he really had to kind of come in and change things up. And in addition to that, they are descended from traitor gene seed. So it's not impossible that the Lion will execute some of the Blood Ravens or essentially cause a bit of strife there. Now, I don't necessarily think that will happen, but it's certainly on the cards, because we have to remember that's basically what the Lion's job is now, is rooting out chaos in all forms of the galaxy, wherever he can find it. Apparently, the Deathwing Strike Master is Captain Asteran of the Third Company. How do you feel about captains wearing bone white armor. Oh, interesting. I see what you're saying. So what Big Monkey King is referring to here is that one of the things about the Dark Angels that's quite cool is that, as you saw in the trailer, you have the bikes, which are painted black. The Ravenwing are black, as are the chaplains. And then you have the standard Dark Angels, who wear the traditional green. And then you have the Deathwing, these kind of Terminators and at least elite units within the Dark Angels of the first company, and they wear bone. And the fact that Captain of the Third Company is wearing bone is sort of it's an interesting one. So it is fine canonically, because of course to be a captain of the Third Company, you would have had to have been inducted into the Deathwing, one of the most inner circles of the Dark Angels, and so he would have the right to wear the bone. But traditionally, captains don't do that. Traditionally, captains do wear the green to go along with their brothers. So it's an interesting one, but I think it's fine. Maybe we'll get more development on this, and maybe the Dark Angels just have too many Terminator suits now, and they're just giving them to everybody. In the book Archmagos, it's implied that Guilliman is on the other side of the rift now. It doesn't just apply. It does say he's on the other side of the rift. So the problem is not that the book says he's on the other side of the rift. That's definitely true. It's just we don't know when Archmagos is set. And I think it is likely set before Devastation of Baal. So I actually don't think that is as big of a deal as you might hope it to be. Again, I don't know that for sure, because the timelines of these novels is really badly done. Games Workshop have not been clear at all when each novel comes out. But I think this book is just set before Devastation of Baal. So Guilliman is going to come back through the Great Rift, but this has actually already happened by the time we get to the Dawn of War game. This is different timelines. Unfortunately, that's just a reality of Warhammer 40k, is that the timelines are all a bit messed up. And it just is what it is. But I'd love to be wrong. I'd love Guilliman to be there. I mean, interestingly, the Cronus planet, I did have a look into it. So it is set in the Ultima Segmentum, which is like the segmentum that contains Ultramar, Guilliman's realm. But because this realm is set so close to the Great Rift, some of the planets are on the systems are on the other side of the Great Rift, and it's likely that's where Kronos is. So unfortunately, I don't think the Lion is going to come into Imperium Sanctus, and I doubt we'll see Guilliman in Imperium Nihilus. But I do think we're going to get a Demon Primarch. I think that this has to happen. If you're going to have a Loyalist Primarch, you've got to have a Traitor Primarch. And my money's on Fulgrim. I reckon it's going to be Fulgrim. I think Fulgrim's just come back. I think we'd all like to see him get some lore. I think Games Workshop will want to build some hype. I think that of the Primarchs, Demon Primarchs that we've seen in the setting again, the one that interests me the most for the Lion is probably Fulgrim, just because they're both Blade Masters. I think that would be a pretty epic fight. Magnus, Mortarion, neither of them are going to like the Lion, and it will be an epic showdown, but I feel like a Fulgrim Lion fight is going to be the most interesting. The truth is, he doesn't have many relationships with Primarchs, so it's not a massive deal. Maybe Angron would be quite an interesting fight again, but of course we've already done that, and Angron's a mad beast. Normally the Dark Angels are bastards, but the thing is, when characters in books or films are bastards for the sake of being pragmatic, that's actually kind of okay. And when it comes to the Lion, normally the reason people can still like the Lion is, yes, the Lion is a dick in how he handles things, but he's still probably making the right decision. And when it comes to books like War of Secrets and how the Dark Angels can behave in 40k, normally they're just spiteful. they're just assholes. So yeah, here's what it is. Magnus would be better used when Russ returns. Yeah, that's true. That's true. I mean, the thing is, they're all going to fight each other at one point or another. I mean, presumably, the Lion and Angron will fight many times, because in Angron's most recent lore, we have this writing around how Angron is going to return every 8 weeks, 8 days, and 8 hours. He's just going to keep coming back forever and ever. And so the fact that the Lion killed him that one time is great, but it does mean Angron's just going to keep coming back, and the Lion's going to have to keep taking him down. How do you think the Lion will view Cypher when they meet? Hello from Cincinnati. Hello, Cincinnati. Great question. When the Lion meets Cypher. So The last time we saw Cypher in Warhammer 40K is when he got literally right before the doors to the throne room, and a custodian who is basically dead at that point in time, being kept alive by the Emperor, gives Cypher a message, and the message is not yet, which, as messages go, not great. Emperor, not great. But still, it does make me wonder, what did the Emperor want Cypher to wait for? And there's some likely options here. Firstly, it has long been theorized that Cypher is connected to the Emperor in a big way. So the sword that Cypher has on his back is known as the Lion Sword, and it is the weapon of the Primarch Lionel Johnson. But in addition to that, it is kind of characterized by being an executioner's weapon. That's what it was originally created for. And so the fact that Cypher wields it has often led people to theorize that, or he doesn't wield it, sorry, but he has it on his back. He never actually uses it. It's too big for him. But if he was ever to use it, he would use it to slay the Emperor, and that has long fed into theories of perhaps Cypher wants to slay the Emperor so the Emperor can be reborn or can be healed or something like that. I personally have never bought that to be the case, but it is a pretty popular theory. I personally believe that Cypher is a Dark Angel from the Horus Heresy known as Corswain. And the reason I believe that is because, firstly, Corswain, the background of the character, he is basically the most impressive Dark Angel within the entire Legion. And he is a Dark Angel that brings low Conrad Kurz, saves Lionel Johnson, and he is a Dark Angel that chases Typhus, throughout a lot of their heresy, and then he actually leads the Dark Angels who, big spoiler, make it to Terra in the Horus Heresy, defend the Astronomicon, and are instrumental in getting the Astronomicon relit so that they intend it to be the case so that Guilliman can make his way to Terra. Unfortunately, Guilliman is too late, but still, the relighting of the Astronomicon, it's implied, gives the Emperor kind of the extra juice that he needs to finally kill his son, Horus Lupercal. So Corswain, very important character. Without him, the Horus Heresy is lost. He's a really big deal, right? Not just him. There's lots of characters who you could say that for, but he is objectively a pretty big deal. And the Dark Angels, it said, all love Corswain. He's a huge, massive deal. But there's only one being that they revere more than Corswain in the Heresy, and that is the Lord Cypher. The Lord Cypher in the Dark Angels in the Heresy is this rank. And it is someone who no longer goes by their original name. They're just known as the Lord Cypher, and they're like almost a being of myth within the Dark Angels. When he fights alongside them, they have a greater fervor, and they think the Lord Cypher is fighting with them once again. It's a tradition that goes back to the original order on Caliban, where the Lion came from, and so it's a big deal that the character of Cypher is. It's a big deal to find out who Cypher is in Warhammer 40k, because he has such a long history within the Dark Angels. Now, at the end of the Horus Heresy, the title of Lord Cypher belongs to a character whose previous name was Zahariel. And Zahariel is the first Dark Angel that you meet in the Heresy in the book Descent of Angels. And when you meet Zahariel, he originally loves the Lion, along with his cousin. They both look up to the Lion. However, Zahariel is one of the Dark Angels who is kind of spurned by the Lion during the Great Crusade and sent back to Caliban after Luther, the Lion's second in command, hesitates in allowing the Lion to basically be nuked. It's a whole story. And so Zahariel is sent back to Caliban, spurned by the Lion to kind of, go and just make more recruits for me, train these new recruits, because we're going to need them for the Great Crusade and later the Horus Heresy, of course. So the fact that Lionel Johnson spurned this Dark Angel, along with other Dark Angels, started this journey which leads to a massive amount of heresy, and the character of Zahariel will go on to be corrupted by this mystical force on Caliban known as the Ouroboros, which is actually basically implies like an Old One's warp drive on the planet, which he believes to be the spirit of Caliban, as he refers to it. Then Zahariel will find out that Lionel Johnson, the Primarch, actually killed Nemiel during the heresy, when Nemiel objected to Lionel Johnson breaking the Edict of Nicaea and allowing his psychic sons to use their librarian gifts in their battles against the demons. And so because he objects to this, the lion actually punches his head off. It's a pretty crazy scene. So you have a huge reason for Zahariel to hate the lion. Now, the sons of Lionel Johnson that turned against him didn't actually necessarily fall to chaos. Most of them just wanted Caliban to be independent. They were sick of how the lion treated them. They didn't like the fact that the Imperium had basically, ripped up the forests of their planet and created these monstrosities. They just wanted to be independent. And also, they were largely led by Luther, who had grown incredibly jealous and bitter towards his brother, Lionel Johnson. So that character, Zahariel, will go on to, after he kills the Lord Cypher at the time, who's also a traitor, he will go on to then take the mantle of Cypher for himself. And essentially, he will sneak onto Corswain's ship during the Horus Heresy and will make it to Terra along with Corswain. So you have the incredible greatest Dark Angel who's ever lived, known as Corswain, and you have the Lord Cypher, the incredibly powerful Zahariel, who is a Psyker and a monster in combat. You have these two legendary Dark Angel heroes fighting for essentially the Emperor on Caliban, despite the fact that Zahariel is a traitor secretly, and Zahariel's aim is to corrupt Corswain and bring him to the side of the traitor Dark Angels, the Fallen. And so we don't know exactly what's going to happen in that story. At the end of the Horus Heresy right now, and the story is still being written, so we need to find out, Zahariel has just basically, it looks like he's been killed. I don't think he will be killed, but it looks like he's been killed. He's taken Typhus's scythe through his chest and it's torn him, almost torn him into, he's not looking well. And that's just the end of his story. So we don't know, they haven't picked it up yet. We presume he will survive because according to the arch-traitor of the Dark Angels, Luther, he sees Corswain and Zahariel fight on Caliban at the time he fights the lion. So it looks like what happens to me is that the lion returns to Caliban. Luther has the Dark Angels on Caliban, the traitor Dark Angels, fire upon the lion. The lion descends down with his sons. They slaughter their way across the planet, and eventually they get to like the central chamber within the rock. And within that chamber, the lion and Corswain enter on one side, and Luther and Zahariel are both waiting for them. And Luther at this point is going to be like, he's kind of like a mini Horus. He's going to be massively empowered by the forces of chaos. But in addition to that, the lion can't really bring himself to kill Luther. So they will have a battle that's largely a parallel to what we see with the Emperor versus Horus. And alongside them, Zahariel and Corswain will do battle. Now, how Corswain could possibly win, I don't know. But I think it's going to be the case that Corswain will win, probably along with the aid of the Watchers in the Dark, these mysterious Xenos creatures who live on the planet, and that will allow Corswain to then take up the mantle of Cypher, and for 10,000 years he's been searching for a way to bring the lion back, and that's what I think is going to have happened. But that was a long answer. Could Cypher be a merge of personality between Corswain and Zahariel, kind of like cool but more messed up? It's not impossible. I don't think that is impossible. I think that it is backed by two things. So there's a couple of like wild things about the character of Cypher. The first thing is that he's not a psyker. He uses pistols, so it doesn't seem like he's Zahariel. And in addition to that, we can be pretty confident he's not at least the Zahariel that we know, because Zahariel is an incredibly powerful psyker, but also Zahariel hates the lion. Just to repeat, the lion spurned him, sent him back to Caliban. The lion killed his cousin, and the lion kind of stole his homeworld in his eyes. So he doesn't just kind of dislike the lion, he despises the lion. The reason he fights with the loyalist Dark Angels during the heresy is because he's just smart enough to understand that it's better to have it's better to have the Emperor win than Horus, because if Horus wins, the entire galaxy will be led to ruin. So it's an understandable concession there. But at the end of the day, he still hates the Lion, and I don't think he would be wanting to save the Lion in any meaningful way. But Cypher in 40K is almost certainly loyal to the Imperium. So most of the time we see Cypher in the books, he is a character who is on both sides. He fights with the forces of chaos sometimes, and then sometimes he comes to the aid of the Imperials. So who can tell what his true motivations are? But in truth, the return, Cypher's actions always benefit the Imperium. Every single time that it comes up in the books, it's always to the benefit of the Imperium. And the fact that I just don't believe Zaharia would do this. I think Zaharia would almost certainly just be corrupted. So the fact that it is Corswain seems far more likely, because he's not a Psyker and because he serves the Imperium, very obviously, in my opinion. Interestingly, we do get POV chapters of Cypher, of course, in his novel, Cypher Lord of the Fallen, but in that book, he's largely just mad. He's just kind of insane. So it's tough to say whether he would actually be interested in kind of saving the Imperium in a meaningful sense, and trying to discern his true intentions is hard. But we do know that Cypher is incredibly loyal to other members of the Fallen and his brothers, and has a lot of sympathy for them. And I think that works well for Corswain. The idea is that it's a merging of their minds in some way. I could get that, to be fair. I could accept that and explain why Cypher appears to be so mad. Would also explain why Cypher's appearance has maybe changed, because Cypher does meet, supposedly, he meets Abaddon in 40K. He meets other traitor forces within 40K, other traitor Dark Angels, and both Corswain and Zaharia would be pretty well known, and so it's kind of a surprise that none of them ever recognize who Zaharia is, or who Cypher is, sorry. So it's a bit weird. The Cypher book pretty much confirms Cypher is loyal with his conversation with you-know-who at the end. Yeah, I mean, I think that I don't really see him being a traitor. I mean, his actions just be weird. Cypher is Omegon. No, he's not. But there we... I love the idea that you can have 20 years of build-up of who the character of Cypher is. This, like, will they, when they... So when you read the Dark Angels books in the Heresy, you were originally introduced to two characters. And of course, your question is, who is Cypher? You have Zahariel and you have Nemiel. It was Zaharia and Nemiel. It's one of these two cousins, right? And then the story continues, and then Nemiel just dies. And you're like, oh, that's that done then. It's going to be Zaharia. But then there's this third character, this legendary Dark Angel hero, who's ridiculously impressive by all accounts. And like, he constantly be there, and he's constantly there. And it looks like they've very clearly set up that the Zaharia, sorry, that they've very clearly set up that the Corswain Zaharia fight is going to be what determines the future of Cypher. So there we go. Why did the Lion leave Zahariel on Caliban? Because Zahariel's closeness to Luther, he got spurned alongside Luther. So after Luther, because basically Luther discovers a plot against the Lion, basically a way for the Lion to be nuked, and when he discovers this, he temporarily doesn't do anything. He allows the plot to continue. He then has a change of heart and does prevent the weapon from going off, but the Lion finds out this has happened, and so realizes he can no longer trust Luther, and Zaharia was close to Luther in this scene, so he also gets punished alongside others. Any reason why there can't be two Cyphers in the current setting, obfuscated just like the twin Primarchs? I mean, I don't think they would repeat that plot line. You know what I mean? I think that would be that wouldn't be great, but I think it's more likely that you'll see the Lion, you'll see only one Cypher, because you only have one Lion sword, and the whole point of Cypher is that he's just sort of this ridiculously impossible being. So in Cypher's novel by John French, when Cypher escapes from the Black Cells, a lot of people theorize about how that could happen, and it's pretty funny in that scene the way Cypher's escape is described, because it kind of like sets up this sort of like Ocean's 11 sort of level of complexity, where Cypher is able to escape the Black Cells on Terra because somehow 200 years earlier or something like that, he had orchestrated a heart attack in a manufacturer worker who was creating a part that would be used in the mechanisms on the door of the specific door he would be imprisoned within on Terra. And that meant that when the Great Rift opened, the door would open and he could escape. It's like a ridiculously complicated thing that's like not possible, but it's like only Cypher could do this kind of thing. Do you know what I mean? And the fact that it is impossible is what makes it funny. Like the Cypher's novel is basically like a heist movie. That's how it's written. How many Inner Circle companions do you have in your Dark Angel collection? Great question. So I have 12. I have 12. So that's 2 squads of 6. I'll be honest, I don't think I'd ever run the 3rd squad, but we'll see. We'll see. I've only painted one of the squads as well, I think, and even them I probably should touch up. So yeah, it's one of those things. I'll probably end up buying the 3rd squad one day, but for now it's like I need to paint what I have. Trying to be a bit more disciplined with these things, you know. Colin, welcome to the channel, bud. Volt, honestly, just want Perturabo back before Lorgar. Is that a point of pride? Yeah, fair enough, man. I mean, I think Perturabo is the more interesting of the two. Like, I sort of feel like Lorgar's story is kind of complete. Do you know what I mean? Like, we sort of know everything we need to know about Lorgar. There's not really any like big mysteries I have about him in terms of like what he's been doing for the last 10,000 years, praying, worshipping the chaos gods, having a good time. Like, that's basically the answer. So I don't really have that. Like, but with Perturabo, I think, like, why did Perturabo ascend to demonhood is a massive question in and of itself. What happened there? What has he been doing for the last 10,000 years? Of all of the demon Primarchs, I would expect him to want to keep invading the Imperium continuously, and he's supposed, like, when the one time we see him, which is in a short story where called Halfbreed, where he speaks to Honzao, and we do see that he has been in many battles, but we don't know exactly why these things have happened. So there's so many questions we have around Perturabo that he is definitely the more interesting of the two, in my opinion. So yeah, if they were going to kill one, they should kill Lorgar. It'd be great. Do you think the Lion is on Kronos to deal with the Mechanicum for awakening and hiding the Necrons, fulfilling his oath to the Emperor? Oh, good question. So I mentioned earlier about the Lion being created first, and I think this is what you're talking about here, Mug Warrior, where the Lion being created first was for a specific reason, and that reason is basically because Mars is a pain in the ass, and Mars constantly is going to seek to be independent from the Imperium in a myriad of ways because the Emperor put limits upon how the Martians could behave. The Martian cult Mechanicus is unique within the Imperium of Man in the Horus Heresy, in the Great Crusade at the very least, because they are able to worship the Master of Mankind as the Omnissiah, and that's not considered heresy. And in addition to that, they're allowed to organize a religion, which generally speaking is a big no-no within the Great Crusade, because everybody must abide by the imperial truth. So the Emperor created the Lion first because he knew that one day the cult Mechanicus would go too far. They would dabble around with artificial intelligence. They would mess around with secrets of chaos potentially that they otherwise shouldn't do so. And so he gave the Lion special permissions. He gave the Lion the Icarus contingency, which basically allows the Lion, upon his own discretion, to obliterate any world that he wants if he suspects that on that world there is the fomentation of rebellion within Mechanicus forces, or they're messing around with like technology that they shouldn't be. And it's said that the Lion does this 8 times during the Great Crusade, and then he does it again in the Horus Heresy. And in addition to that, the Emperor gives the Lion a massive armory. The armory of the Dark Angels in the Great Crusade and the Heresy far exceeds the other legions, to the degree it's said that it rivals the Legio Custodes. You have things like the Black Cells on Terra and all this kind of technology these Space Marines just don't have. So the Emperor created the Lion first, largely to keep Mars in check, but Mars doesn't know this. And if the Lion sees the Mechanicus ever messing around with things that they shouldn't, he is allowed to kill just to completely obliterate them. But when the lion kills things, he does so in a way, like it said that where Leman Russ would kill something as a spectacle, like the point of Leman Russ is he's the threat. They're like, oh my god, I don't want to see Leman Russ. If the Dark Angels kill you, they kill you, kill all your friends and family, destroy your town, make sure no one knows what happened here, leaving no traces. They're just war crime central. The idea being that they don't want any records of anything to survive. And so anything that is a threat to the Imperium will be completely obliterated. And so that's what the lion does. So the fact that in the Dawn of War trailer, we see the Mechanicus kind of delving into the planet and messing around with this sort of Necron technology, that could be enough of a reason for the lion to want to obliterate these Mechanicus forces, because the Mechanicus aren't supposed to deal with Xenos tech in that respect. They're not supposed to try and utilize Xenos tech. Basically, the rules of the Mechanicus is not necessarily that they can't innovate, but they are only allowed to try and innovate technology that humanity previously had. Basically, what their belief is that humanity's technology in the Dark Age of technology was like the pinnacle, like the best kind of tech you could have. And so going beyond that is heresy. Xenos tech is heresy. So it's a pretty big deal that the Mechanicus are sort of messing around with seemingly Necron tech in that trailer. And perhaps that's why the lion has come to wreak his vengeance. Furthermore, in that story, in that trailer, it does talk about ancient horrors that are about to be awakened. Almost certainly we're going to see the emergence of a Catan in the Dawn of War, most likely the Void Dragon, like the most popular Catan, I'd say. And seeing the lion fight against the Void Dragon is very thematic. On Caliban, the lion is one of the monster slayers of Caliban, so him fighting against a Void Dragon, you know, it's emblematic of the Emperor's fight versus the Void Dragon in ages past. It's just, oh, be beautiful, wouldn't it? Wouldn't that be so fantastic? Would love that. Is the lion aware of the Tekokra engine? So he is almost certainly aware of it existing. He utilized it in the heresy. Azrael has probably told him about the fact that it was stolen during the battle against Vashtor and the Black Legion. So, but yeah, I mean, it's all sort of, in a weird way, it's going to be perhaps something that will come back to bite the lion in the ass, because basically, like I mentioned the Ouroboros earlier, the Ouroboros has two sisters, and one of them is the Tekokra engine. And the Tekokra engine was found by the lion and the Death Guard in the Horus Heresy, and the lion gets to it first and steals it before Typhus can get his disgusting smelly mitts up on it. And he takes it back to the Dark Angel's ship, which is the Invincible Reason. And in the Horus Heresy, the lion uses this to tremendous effect, because this incredibly powerful ancient device allows the lion to understand things that he otherwise shouldn't. And Guilliman calls him out on this in the heresy. Like, the lion keeps coming to these meetings with the Guilliman and Sanguinius, and the lion's got this information he shouldn't have. Like, how do you know this, lion? You know, Guilliman keeps asking him, and the lion, of course, kind of just like plays it off. He's like, you know, we all know stuff. You know, it's what it is. Just I had a think in my brain, and I just figured it out. But basically, the lion, he because he lied so much to Guilliman doesn't trust him, understandably, and this is just another more fuel on the fire of the difficulties in their relationship, because the lion's lies to his brother has ultimately led to this catastrophe of the forces of chaos getting their hands on this ancient and powerful device, which is going to lead to Abaddon the Despoiler getting his hands on a weapon so powerful it could end the entire setting. So the lion may well have to suck eggs in front of his brother. We'll see. Sandman, do you think that Games Workshop will remake the lion to be more like a big brother figure, now helping others, not ditching them mid-fight and keeping secrets? Do you think the lion can lead until the Emperor returns? I do think there's going to be a bit of that. I think that would be popular, is the fact that the lion would actually be a worthy leader now. You'd actually quite like the lion to be a leader. But there is a lot of Dark Angel's kind of lore and personality that I quite like. And so the idea that you're going to get rid of the secrets, I don't necessarily know how much I want that. Like, I quite like the fact that the Lion does keep secrets within secrets. It also makes him quite a good replacement for the Emperor, because the Emperor kept secrets within secrets. And even, for example, if we have a look at the structure of the Dark Angels, like we spoke earlier about how you have Deathwing, Ravenwing, nowadays we say Greenwing, but in the past we just said Stormwing, Firewing, Dreadwing, Stormwing, like the all 6 wings. The reason you had these wings is because they were based off of the hosts that was a unique system created for the Dark Angels by the Emperor. So the Dark Angel structure is largely influenced by the Emperor's own design, whereas a lot of the way the legions were afterwards became its own sort of thing. And so the Lion's structure is quite similar to the Emperor in that way. So it's kind of cool to see that he's now actually going to be a worthy leader, but I don't think he will be. I don't think he will be thrown into the ring there for a long time. Guilliman's basically your best bet. Even if all of the Primarchs were back, Guilliman's going to do what needs to be done. I think the Lion has a perfect role in Imperium Nihilus. The Knight of Nihilus is a great position for him. I think that you'd want Dawn probably developing some sort of stronghold somewhere, and that would just be a fantastic plot. The idea that Dawn just makes like the most heavily defended fortress system the galaxy's ever seen, that would be cool, wouldn't it? Something like that. Then Corvus Corax and Jagatai Khan are real wild cards. Lehman Russ, I imagine, would go team up with the Lion. I think that's probably what would happen. And then Vulcan. Yeah, Vulcan, I don't know. Vulcan's Vulcan's probably the most important Primarch to return. He's the last true artisan of the Emperor's son. So I think that he could change a lot of things around depending on what he can crack up in his laboratories and forges. So we'll see. Dawn of War 3 lacks good RTS mechanics. Fair enough. AI has made the price of RAM memory to jump through the roof. The Imperium was always right about abominable intelligence. Yeah, I heard about this. I was watching, there's a YouTube channel called CoffeeZilla. Sorry, this is a massive tangent. He was talking about this because, did you guys ever watch the film The Big Short? Michael Burry from that, who predicted like the financial crash, and he wrote a piece about how when people talk about like the .com bubble of like the early 2000s, it's talked about in the sense of like, oh, well, actually the .com bubble wasn't that bad because the internet did become a big thing. So were these things overhyped? Some things were overhyped, yeah, but mostly it was kind of on point. And his argument was that really it was the company Cisco that was overvalued, and that's where the crash came from. And likewise, the equivalent in the AI bubble, as it were, is Nvidia, because they are now making, their gaming revenue is apparently being dwarfed by their AI revenue pretty much. So everything that they make is just being bought up by people, making massive AI processors. So it's a mad one. It's a mad one. Sam, I just want to say you're the GOAT. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate that. Love Coffee. He is good. I mean, I have so much respect for him because, I don't know how these things work, but he literally puts on the line. I mean, worst case for my channel, I get an angry email from Games Workshop. Maybe maybe Nick Kai messages me and says, hey, can you not be so mean about my books or something like that? But CoffeeZilla, half his videos are just calling out billion-dollar companies, and you're just like, Jesus Christ, man, how are you let alone getting assassinated, how are you not just sued into oblivion? Everything he must say, he has to just double check 12 times, presumably, because they're gonna latch onto anything that he would slightly get wrong and crush him. Crazy. Do you think Horseway is really Cypher? 100%, 100%. I don't hate the theory of he's merged with Zahariel. I don't dislike that, but I think that if Cypher is Corswain, I think that the story of Cypher becomes the best story in sci-fi. Think about it, man. Corswain is just, in terms of explaining it quickly to your pals, like Corswain is this legendary figure who was loyal to the lion to the end, but upon the lion being felled, he came to understand why some of his brothers had been tricked into betraying the lion. And so he spent 10,000 years trying to save as many of his brothers as he could and trying to find a way to bring his Genesire back. And then the cost of doing so was his mind. He lost his mind in doing so. But even despite his madness, he stayed loyal to the lion till the very end. I think that is immediately my favorite story in sci-fi, and I would love it so much. And I don't think there's much of a chance of Cypher making it to the end times, but I still think the story is worthwhile doing. Sandman, do you think Belisarius Cawl has made an AI version of the lion like he has Bobby G? Not yet, because he doesn't know the lion is alive, but eventually, perhaps. It wouldn't surprise me. Yeah. I mean, he made the version of Gilliman off of old recordings of Gilliman and approximations of how Gilliman would behave. So he could do one for the lion, that's true. But I don't think he would do yet. I'm a newbie, watching your channel for about a year. Thanks, man. Still don't get it 100%. Can you please do a Primarch by Primarch breakdown? I can do that. I mean, if chat doesn't mind. I mean, so what would be the best way? Have they still got the old Horus Heresy website up? I used to love that website. It had a whole map of the galaxy and a timeline that you could go down. But then I think they took it down. Explore the Galaxy? Is it on there? Yeah, they fucking bastard. No, scroll. Yeah, they took it down. Oh, no. Why did they do that? Ah, man, why would you get rid of that? Presumably that was quite a lot of work. Yeah, it's gone. Okay. All right. We'll count down from 20. So 20, the Alpha Legion, Alpharius, Omegon, they're often referred to. Bit of an odd place to start. They are a very mysterious legion, probably the most mysterious out of all of the legions. They are an infiltrating legion, described as the Ghost Legion in the Great Crusade, because for a long time in the Great Crusade, people weren't even sure whether they were real. But by the time you get to the Horus Heresy, there are rumors that perhaps the Alpha Legion is actually like the greatest and most powerful out of all of the legions, just in secret. And in Alpharius's Primarch novel, we find out that actually Alpharius allegedly landed on Terra, not on some planet across the galaxy. And so Alpharius was found by the Emperor immediately upon Terra. Now, at that point in time of him finding Alpharius, the Emperor believed that all of the Primarchs were lost except for the Primarch of the Alpha Legion. So he trains and raises Alpharius in secret along with Malkador to sort of act as this is just kind of unique agent. But for the most part, they treat all the Primarchs as lost until they find Horus Lupercal, the 16th Primarch, who is the first Primarch officially to be found. When they find Horus Lupercal, the Emperor says, you know what, Alpharius, stay in secret, don't reveal yourself, and I'll use you as an agent for a long time. So Alpharius exists in secret in the background of the Great Crusade the entire time, and it's only towards right at the end of the Great Crusade that we actually find out that Alpharius had a twin called Omegon. Alpharius and Omegon meet, and officially Alpharius is revealed to Horus. And so when we see Horus meet Alpharius in the Great Crusade, we actually are seeing him, like Alpharius, officially reveal himself. But Alpharius has been around technically for a long time. So the Alpha Legion are incredibly important because they are the ultimate clandestine, plans within plans legion. They are essentially loyal to the Emperor of Mankind throughout the heresy and do various things to support the loyalists in their heresy, but officially they are traitors, and many of their sons, of course, now believe that they are traitor legion. Moving down one, 19th Legion, Corvus Corax. On the moon of Deliverance, Corvus Corax was raised by these kind of slave gang overlords, and Corvus Corax is basically like a freedom fighter. He's like a terrorist, and he fights. He achieves freedom upon his planet before he is found by the Emperor. What's interesting about Corvus Corax is that his story in the Heresy largely revolves around his discovery of what and who the Primarchs are. So he sees, for example, the Emperor's kind of a true form, like for a brief moment when he meets the Emperor, and a lot of his story is finding out about who the Primarchs are, what the Primarchs are, how the Space Marines are made. And the reason this comes up so much is because Corvus Corax is of the Raven Guard. They're one of the legions that is decimated in the Istvan 5 drop site massacre betrayal, and so he ends up having to recreate his legion in the Heresy, and he does so, but the problem is that the entire work has been sabotaged by the Alpha Legion, who basically infected the new aspirants with kind of like demonic infusion. And so in the end, Corvus Corax, trying to regrow his legion so quickly, has to euthanize huge quantities of his sons. He ends up basically kind of going off and committing clandestine ties and acts throughout most of the Horus Heresy. He ends up joining with the Lion and Leman Russ, and they have like a good time just kind of killing traitors, but he's actually not there during the Siege of Terra because he's off just kind of like attacking supply lines, etc., because most of his sons are dead, and this greatly affected him, and he just disappears in the end, goes off and fights in the Eye of Terror. Going now on 18th Legion, Salamanders, Vulcan, Nocturne, fantastic, great guys, often referred to as just kind of the good guys of the Space Marines, and it's kind of hard not to see why, really. They are pretty decent men as far as Space Marines go. All Space Marines are psycho-indoctrinated, crazy warriors who have been tasked with by the Emperor of Mankind with hunting down all the Xenos, the mutants, the heretics. So they're all a bit nuts, but Vulcan actually seems to have a genuine compassion for humanity. His sons, the Salamanders, they do have a genuine respect for humanity. They keep in contact with humanity, and they're old families, and they get along very well. Vulcan is very sadly captured by Corvus Corax again during the by Conrad Kurz again, sadly during the Drop Sign Massacre, and in the drops, and he is basically tortured and killed many times during the Horus Heresy. And Conrad Kurz discovers the problem with killing Vulcan is that he doesn't stay dead. He keeps coming back. Every time Vulcan kills him, he cuts his head off, he incinerates him, he fries him all the way down to the bones. Vulcan can just always come back to life. The reason he can do this is because out of all of the Primarchs, he has a unique ability, an ability inherited from his father. He is a perpetual. He can't ever truly die, as far as we know. He ends up basically, he spends a lot of the Heresy basically insane. After all of these attempts to kill him, drive him, he doesn't die, but he's driven completely mad. He does regain his sanity in the Heresy, but it's at a huge cost, and he actually secretly makes it to the Siege of Terra, and we don't see him fighting very much in the siege because he has a very important role. He has to safeguard the throne, and also he creates a device that will detonate the Golden Throne pretty much and sacrifice the birth order of humanity if he deems it to be the case that the birth order of humanity is going to be lost. So Vulcan has a very important job. His job is to decide when and if the homeworld, the birth world of humanity, should be destroyed. Down one again, the 17th Legion, the Word Bearers, absolute pricks, a lot of them. Lorgar Aurelian, the planet of Colchis. The planet of Colchis is a planet where they had worshipped deities as gods long before the Emperor got there, and so Lorgar is raised in this kind of incredibly religious environment, and he of course excels, as all the Primarchs excel as a youth, and he's this incredible orator. He's actually surprisingly likable despite what you might hear about him from the fandom, and by the time he meets the Emperor tells him the truth that there are no gods, etc., etc., but Lorgar has this kind of like burning lust within him. He must find out if there are gods. He must find out the truth of the galaxy. And the reason that that's so important is because he knows that every planet they go to, every planet, there are people that worship gods. And so he comes to the conclusion there has to be a reason for this. There must be something else. There must be something out there. And so he decides that he's going to go on this quest to find the truth of the galaxy, despite the fact the Emperor has repeatedly told him not to do this. And the Ultramarines were even tasked with destroying the city of Monarchia, this incredibly important city in 40k that is used to basically punish Lorgar and the Wordbearers and teach them the error of their ways. They must stop worshipping the Emperor as a god. They must stop wasting all this time during the Great Crusade building temples and cities and statues to the Emperor's glory. It's just ridiculous because without any gods to worship, they of course chose the Emperor as their divine leader. And yeah, because he ends up searching for gods, he does find them. He finds the Chaos Gods, and they are instrumental in basically orchestrating a lot of the heresy. The Wordbearers will go on to found these kind of warrior cults within warrior lodges within various legions, and the warrior lodges are sort of the seeds through which the heresy springs. And Erebus in particular, the Dark Apostle of the Wordbearers, first chaplain, he will go on to be incredibly close to Horus Lupercal and push Horus towards damnation. And that takes us on to the 16th Legion, which is Horus's Legion, the Lunar Wolves, later the Sons of Horus. And the Sons of Horus, you know them, you love them. They're who you lose your virginity to. When you start reading Warhammer 40k, you first read about Horus Lupercal. He's this incredible man, absolutely love him, and then he throws it all away. He was an incredibly impressive leader, the first Primarch found by the Emperor officially, as I say. And when he's found by the Emperor, they have 30 years together where they just grow and bond, a relationship that none of the other Primarchs have with the Master of Mankind outside of maybe Alfarius. And so Horus Lupercal is just kind of beloved by everybody. Of all of the gifts that the Primarchs have, he's like the ultimate leader. He's the ultimate politician. He's got all of the ambition that the Emperor has, and so the Emperor makes him War Master eventually, kind of the leader out of all of the Primarchs, and he's pushed towards damnation by the actions of the Wordbearers, and of course a little help from being stabbed by his old friend Eugen Temba using basically a magical blade known as the Anathame. And when Horus is stabbed by this blade, he is shown a series of visions and convinced that the Emperor seeks godhood, the Emperor keeps lying to them all, the Emperor will one day throw the Primarchs away. And yeah, he ends up accepting the embraces of chaos, partly to save his own life, partly because he believes the Emperor is a liar. And so it is that the Horus heresy unfolds. Dead now, as you can imagine. Then 15th Legion, Thousand Sons, the Harry Potters of Warhammer 40k, with a slight twist. They were the slight downside with the Thousand Sons in that they were incredibly psychically gifted with Magnus the Red's gene seed, but they suffered from a mutation, mutations that would cause them to basically turn into like kind of chaos spawn over time. And this even happens to Ahriman's brother, Ahriman being the first captain of the Thousand Sons. Magnus the Red, the Primarch of the Thousand Sons, he would try to fix this affliction and would fail. The Emperor also tried to fix the affliction and he also failed. Magnus the Red, it's basically implied, made a secret deal with Tzeentch, even when he was loyal, not really understanding what Tzeentch was at the time, and made a deal with Tzeentch to basically cure his legion of the affliction, costing him the eye. Henceforth, he would be known as the Cyclops. And the Thousand Sons are famous because they originally were incredibly loyal to the Master of Mankind, foreseeing that Horus would betray the Emperor. He actually tried to warn the Emperor of Horus's incoming betrayal, but sadly, Horus had seen this coming, and so Magnus's attempt to warn the Emperor backfired massively because Magnus tried to contact the Emperor by basically sending out a psychic projection of his mind through the warp to contact the Emperor. And as it goes through the warp, it notices a little route it can go down to get to Terra, to get to the Emperor. So it takes that route because it thinks it's easy. And what it's actually just done is blown into the webway, blown past the wards that protect this part of the webway that the Emperor has been working in. And this is a huge project of the Emperor to basically allow humanity to access the webway, this kind of secret dimension. And when he blows past it, the cataclysm is unbelievable. Literally millions of people die straight away. There's huge explosions, demons start pouring into Terra. It's a whole thing. It's a disaster. Starts a whole war called the War Within the Webway that the custodians have to fight, and along with the Sisters of Silence, Imperial Knights, everyone's, it's a complete disaster. So Magnus the Red tried to do something good, but it backfired massively, ended up, basically determining the future of Warhammer 40k, because it's that act which requires the Emperor to henceforth be bound to the Golden Throne. The Emperor does power the Astronomicon in Warhammer 40k, he does direct it, but He doesn't actually need to be on the Golden Throne for that. The reason he has to be on the Golden Throne is to keep the warp rift that Magnus the Red created, or caused at least, under the Imperial Palace closed. And so it's a big deal. So yeah, Magnus the Red, good intentions, but didn't go well. In the end, because he'd made so many mistakes, he ends up just throwing in his lot with the traitors anyway. And by the end of the heresy, he has ascended to become a demon prince of Slaanesh, of Tzeentch, sorry. So just a bit of a dick. Another demon Primarch up next, Mortarion of the Death Guard. Never really liked the Emperor, grew up again on a horrible world called Barbarous, and Barbarous had like half Xenos, half human overlords, and they like Mortarion's adoptive father did treat Mortarion with a bit of respect because he obviously understood that Mortarion had tremendous power. However, eventually Mortarion, along with his best friend Typhon, join a rebellion, start a rebellion against the Xenos overlords, and they're very nearly successful. They very nearly overtake the planet and kill the overlords, but they don't quite make it. And just before their final battle, the Emperor actually appears to Mortarion for the first time, and he says, hey, why don't you submit to me? Why don't you join my Imperium? And Mortarion says, no, I don't need you. You know, I'm my own man. Fuck off, Dad. And then the Emperor's like, all right. But if you do need my help, then you have to come work for me. And Mortarion's like, fine. Anyway, so Mortarion tries to finish everything quickly and actually ends up succumbing to the poisons of the planet before he can kill his adoptive father. And so the Emperor swoops in, kills his adoptive father, and says, that's right, now you work for me. Mortarion never really forgave this. He never liked the Emperor, and so he is quite happy to join Horus in rebellion. However, he wasn't happy to become a demon Primarch. Mortarion is kind of characterized by hating Psychers, and so because the overlords on his planet were Psychers, and so he never wanted to become a demon Primarch, never wanted to become a slave to the Chaos God Nurgle, but he was basically tricked by Typhon, who had sworn in with Nurgle a long time previously, into basically making a warp jump where they would be susceptible to the plagues of Nurgle. And Mortarion is basically faced with a choice: accept Nurgle's gifts, or your entire legion is going to suffer unto death. So he ends up accepting the gifts. And so yeah, Mortarion, again, a bit of a tragedy. He was happy to turn on the Emperor, but he's a relatively noble tragedy in his acceptance of the gifts of Nurgle. Number 13th, unlucky. Ooh, number 13. Unlucky. The Ultramarines. Rabute Guilliman, homeworld of Macragge. Very important faction, the poster child of Warhammer 40K, pretty much. They are pretty much Rome in space. Rabute Guilliman is largely like the Primarch. That's how I see him. He's the most standard of all the Primarchs. He's good at most things. Where he excels is basically multitasking. Lionel Johnson talks about this in his novel, where he talks about how where Lionel Johnson can focus on any individual thing and master it, Rabute Guilliman can handle many, many things at once. And that's why he's such an incredible commander, why he's so suited to being Lord Commander of the Imperium. And he was cut off from Terra during the heresy, starts something called the Unremembered Empire, which is technically, not even technically, it is just heresy. Because there's a warp rift that cuts his homeworld off from getting home to Terra, he basically assumes the Emperor has died, or has probably died, and so he decides to consolidate his position, and he is found by Lionel Johnson and Sanguinius in the heresy, and the Lion says, by the way, this is heresy, and Guilliman says, no, it's cool, don't worry about it, and the Lion says, fair enough. And so they kind of form this little new second Imperium together, and eventually the Lion discovers or realizes that the Emperor must be alive, because Conrad Kurz still fears his death at the hands of the Emperor. And so they end up going all speed towards Terra, and Guilliman gets to Terra far too late, sadly. And it's kind of funny because old Warhammer 40k, classic Warhammer 40k, will tell you that Rabute Guilliman's arrival in the Sol system is what turns the tide against the traitors. But tragically, it's actually not true. And he had very little impact on the heresy at all, but he was instrumental in mopping up the traitors, and that is a huge deal because he blunted the traitor forces so greatly after the heresy. But yes, he after the heresy will become Lord Commander of the Imperium, be like the second Emperor, and with the Emperor's kind of powers, and he will end up being brought low by his demon brother Fulgrim, and Fulgrim is a much better blaze master than him. and slashes Guilliman across the neck, and Guilliman gets put in stasis for 10,000 years. And after 10,000 years, the Imperium finds a way to bring him back, and such begins modern Warhammer 40k. Number 12, the Word Bearers. Poor Angron. Angron is like Spartacus if Spartacus lived on a planet run by people who are more psychos than the Romans, I guess. So he's kind of like Spartacus, but he's got implants in his brain known as the butcher's nails, and the butcher's nails force Angron, or whoever has them, to constantly be seeking combat, constantly being seeking ways to murder people, because that's the only way they feel any kind of sort of pleasure, basically. And so it's a pretty fucked up version of the Spartacus story. He does kind of seek rebellion, freedom, along with some of his gladiatorial brothers and sisters, and they aren't successful at all. They end up being hunted by the high riders of the planet, and in the end they make a last stand in this valley, and there's Angron and all of these gladiators. They're ready to make this last stand against the high riders who are attacking them with far superior technology, and this is their glorious death that they've all kind of wanted for, really. They'd rather die free men and women than exist as slaves, but brutally the Emperor saves only Angron, and Angron is he forever hates the Emperor of Mankind, not just because he saved him, but not just because he has the butcher's nails, but also because the Emperor saved Angron and none of his brothers and sisters. And so Angron always wished that he would have just died on New Syria, and so he basically just wants to kill stuff, and eventually he is found to be dying from the butcher's nails. They're going to kill him, and so the Primarch Lorgar in the Heresy orchestrates Angron's ascendancy to demonhood, and so it is that Angron becomes the demon prince of the Chaos God Khorne, and becomes one of the most powerful, terrifying forces in the galaxy, but completely mad, no sentience. When he meets the Lion in 40k, he doesn't even recognize him. He's just a madman. Down 1, 10. Ferrus Manus of the Iron Hands, planet of Medusa. Ferrus Manus, whose name means Iron Hands, has iron hands. The reason he has iron hands is because as a child he would find this pool of, he would fight these Xenos, and then he'd put his hands in this pool of what we know in 40k to be necrodermis, living metal, the metal of the Necrons from the Dawn of War trailer. And when he puts his hands in this necrodermis, it bonds with his genetics, because Primarch genetics is special, and so he literally has iron hands. So he is able to forge and craft things literally using his own hands. He's a pretty cool guy. He grew incredibly close to his brother Fulgrim, and that's quite a bizarre friendship because Fulgrim is incredibly flamboyant and, I want to say annoying, incredibly flamboyant and annoying. And yeah, Ferrus Manus is incredibly taciturn and stoic, and the ultimate stoic Primarch, really. And during the Horus Heresy, he is also taken by surprise in the Drop Site Massacre. The difference between him, Vulcan, and Corvus Corax, however, is that Ferrus Manus dies. He is killed by Fulgrim in the Drop Site Massacre. He is prophesized to one day return. The Iron Hands do believe that he will one day come back, but as far as we know, we don't know exactly how that will manifest. There are rumors, I've talked about this before, that he might lead something called the Legion of the Damned, these kind of army of ghostly space marines that appear sometimes. But yeah, the Iron Hands do believe one day he'll come back. We'll see. Down 1, 10, down 9, another dead Primarch. Sanguinius, the Primarch of the Blood Angels, the Baal system. So the Baal system is a really weird system, because it used to be a system that was owned and controlled by Xenos. And the Xenos of this planet used to worship angels, a black angel and a golden angel. Turns out that this is a reference to Sanguinius, because Sanguinius is probably the most noble out of all of the Primarchs. He's incredibly likable. Even when you look at him, you have your best memory come into your mind. That's how great Sanguinius is. And when you look at Sanguinius, he is what all the Primarchs kind of want to be. He is the ultimate warrior. He's very much the best combatant out of all of the Primarchs. That's a pretty consistent theme in the books. And he is also just kind of loved by everybody, and the most talented in art and all this kind of stuff. So you can't not like Sanguinius. And so he is also not unique, but he does have prophecies as well. He is able to see into the future, and he foresees his own death at the hands of Horus Lupercal in the heresy. He still goes to face Horus despite the fact he's foreseen his own death. He hopes the prophecy can be beaten, but he thinks he might have found a way to trick the prophecy. Sadly, he is not true. He dies, and he dies a very brutal death where he's beaten like a dog. And his death causes a psychic backlash, which affects all of the blood angels, his sons. And the blood angels thereafter suffer from a curse known as the Black Rage, where sometimes, very rarely, in the heat of battle, they can believe they are Sanguinius in his final moments, and they start seeing everyone around them as Horus, and it's pretty cool when that happens. They also have another curse called the Red Thirst, which is a curse that just basically makes them want to eat everything and get everything. Down one, number 8, Conrad Kaz, another Primarch who can see into the future, but sort of the opposite of Sanguinius in a way. He is not noble whatsoever. He comes from the planet of Nostromo, Primarch of the Night Lords, and the planet of Nostromo is basically a planet. It's a crime planet. It's the only thing they really do is crimes. Their main job, their main thing that they do. And he hated that planet. He hated being on there. He kind of grows up as like a crazy Batman type figure. He exists to basically bring justice to the planet, but his own twisted form of justice. Probably the most famous and crazy scene. There's a bit in his Primarch novel where he meets a woman who is going to commit suicide, and he kills her because committing suicide is a crime. So he's not a good guy by any means, stretch the imagination, but basically he was driven mad by the visions of his own death, and so even though he's kind of like the Primarch that embodies justice, is a twisted version of justice, in the end he will actually end up destroying the planet of Nostromo because all of his sons are drawn from this kind of criminal planet, and they're all psychos and nuts. So Conrad Kurz basically hates them. There's a bit in the heresy where Conrad Kurz thinks all his sons have been killed by the Dark Angels because the Dark Angels beat them in this big battle, and he doesn't care. He doesn't care whatsoever. He's very happy that all his sons have died. None of them deserve to live in his future. So hey ho. In the end, he was kind of forces his own future to become correct. Basically, the story of Conrad Kurz is are visions of the future always correct? Sanguinius says no, Conrad Kurz says yes, but Conrad Kurz's story very much implies Sanguinius is right, but still he does foresee his own death, and he is killed by a Imperial assassin known as M. Shen, and we see the aftermath of that start off in the Night Lord series, which is very popular series in Warhammer 40k. Down one, number 7, Imperial Fist, Rogel Dawn, loves Lego, planet of Inuit. And he, as a youth, on the planet of Inuit, not a bad planet to grow up in, very cold, he actually finds a very large and extravagant vessel in space, which is known as the Phalanx, and it's one of the largest vessels in Warhammer 40k. And this is an ancient, long-lost spaceship of humanity that he finds, and he is able to fix it himself. And when the Emperor finds him in the Inuit system, he actually gives it. He immediately realizes who the Emperor is, his father, and he gives the Emperor the Phalanx as a gift. Just immediately. And the Emperor says, "Thank you very much, but you can use it for the time being." He's a good dad. And so, yeah, this incredible vessel is kind of central to a lot of the Imperial Fist stories. The Phalanx is one of the most powerful vessels in the entire setting, so it comes up quite a lot. Rogel Dawn, also the ultimate kind of defender, Praetorian of Terra. He is the person who fortified the birthword of humanity and was instrumental in the Siege of Terra. Without the Siege of Terra, without Dawn at the Siege of Terra, the Loyalists would have certainly lost much sooner. But because he is such a good commander, such a good strategist, he is key to the Imperial defense. And he is probably the best Primarch at not doing massive screw-ups in their heresy at the very least, and pretty much crushes it. He has a pretty good story in the heresy. Most of the Primarchs make big mistakes except Dawn, but at the end of the heresy, he gets basically trapped by Horus in this little dimension where he's tortured by the blood god Khorne for hundreds of years. So we're yet to see the impact of that, but I assume bad. Down one, number 6, Leman Russ, Planet of Fenris, Space Wolves. So yeah, they love wolves, man. Wolfy wolf, wolves. Everything they have is the wolf something, the ice something, the frost something. The Space Wolves love wolves. Did you know the Space Wolves love wolves? And in their story, there are a lot of wolves, and they behave very wolfily. in all seriousness, so Leman Russ is basically characterized by being the Primarch who... He is the Primarch who is like the noble savage, right? So the idea with Leman Russ is that you look at him and you think he's just a brute, but in reality, he is the smartest of all the Primarchs, or one of the smartest. But he keeps all of that hidden behind his brutish appearance. And truthfully, he's one of the smartest. The slight downside is that in the books, he's often a complete fucking idiot. So it doesn't normally hold up in that respect. But still, it's a really interesting little storyline for Space Wolves to have. He is characterized often by being the Emperor's Executioner. That's kind of like an unofficial title that he has. But he is allegedly connected to the loss of the 11th and 2nd Primarchs. I didn't cover the 11th because there's nothing really to say. Yeah, supposedly he's the Emperor's Executioner, and he is the reason behind the loss of those two Primarchs, supposedly. So we'll see. He also is used by the Emperor to bring Magnus the Red to justice once Magnus the Red makes his big error, as we saw earlier. But Leman Russ actually can't hold himself back, and so he decides to kill Magnus the Red. He's not going to bring him in for questioning. He's going to kill him, and so he goes way too far, and that's what causes Magnus the Red to basically turn against the Imperium. And it's that mistake which is a huge error for Leman Russ, and without him making that mistake, the heresy might have been very, very different. So we'll see. Down 1, 5, Jagatai Khan, probably my second favorite Primarch, and the one I think is going to return next. The White Scars, one of the best written, probably the best written heresy, Legion in the Heresy. Jagatai Khan is kind of cool in that he isn't characterized by an unwavering loyalty to the Emperor. He actually debates whether he should side with Horus or not. And he sides with the Emperor because he believes it's the best thing to do. But he is an incredibly wise Primarch. He is an incredibly skilled Blaze Master. But he does side with the Emperor in the end and fights with Rogel Dawn, Sanguinius at the Siege of Terra. But he is, yeah, a really great character. The most interesting development for him, I'm going to say, is the fact that he died. He properly died during the Siege of Terra. And the impacts of that we're yet to see. But presumably it will be massive. So we don't know what his death will have done to him, but he literally went to the other side and was brought back by the Emperor. So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. But yeah, I think he's probably the most likely one to come back. He disappeared because he went back to his home after the Horus Heresy, and it was being basically attacked consistently by Drukhari, who had taken lots of his people slaves. He fights them all back to this Webway Gate, and he actually goes through the Webway Gate. And that's the last that anybody saw of him. So why he followed the Drukhari with his elite bodyguards into the Webway, nobody knows. But presumably he was working on something. So we'll see. Number 4, 3 left. Iron Warriors, Perturabo, the counter to Rogel Dawn, really. And his world is Olympia. It's basically ancient Greece. And he's kind of... he's a famously brutal Primarch. So when he meets his sons for the first time in the Great Crusade, he has them commit decimation. He kills 1 in every 10 of them, and that Space Marine has to be beaten to death by his brothers to encourage them to be better Space Marines. Not the best logic, I'll be honest with you. So he's a very brutal commander. He is always behind Rogel Dawn in pretty much everything, but he does slowly get better. And whereas Rogel Dawn is instrumental to the Loyalist defense, without Perturabo, the traitor attack would have been a lot less coordinated. On the traitor side in the Heresy, you have Horus. You have all of the traitor Primarchs except Lorgar, who's fucked off. And so Horus is busy trying to ascend to become a god, so he's useless. And then all of the other Primarchs are basically demons, and so they can't be controlled or organized in any meaningful capacity. Oh, Conrad Kurz is also not there, sorry. He's also fucked off, sent by Sanguinius. So, yeah, the Perturabo is basically the linchpin of the defense, of the attack, and is very important in that regard. But eventually he realizes how much of a shit Horus is, so he leaves the Siege of Terra, and for some reason decides to turn himself into a perfect weapon. And we are yet to find out what that looks like. Fulgrim, Purple, Chemos, Emperor's Children. The Emperor's Children, ironically named in 40k, but a relatively justified name in the Great Crusade because they were instrumental in saving the Emperor of Mankind when he was nearly killed during one battle. The Emperor's children do save him, and so they are allowed to name themselves the Emperor's children, and they wear the Palatine Aquila, the symbol of the Emperor, on their armor, which comes up in, and I cannot stress this enough, every single Emperor's Children novel. It comes up all the time. So they are originally like the ultimate, like perfect warriors. They constantly seek perfection, and it's that seeking of perfection that ends up leading to chaos. Fulgrim, incredibly close to Ferrus Manus, as I said earlier, and actually uses a sword that was created in his duel in a competition that Fulgrim had against Ferrus to see who could craft the more perfect weapon. But when he finds the Leia blade in this temple on this planet, he picks it up, thinks it's a really nice blade, starts to use it, and it's actually a demon weapon, and that demon ends up drawing him into the worship of Slaanesh. It temporarily takes over his body, but Fulgrim gets it back, and he ends up ascending to demonhood and halfway through the heresy as a demon Primarch of Slaanesh. As a demon Primarch of Slaanesh, most of the time we see him in the lore, he's very uninterested in anything. He's obviously seeking pleasure and excess, so he's not really interested in conquering the galaxy much of the time. But in his most recent novel, Fulgrim, that seems to have changed, and he's now apparently wants to become a new emperor, so we'll see how that plays out. And then finally we have the Dark Angels, and just the best legion. They really had to soften Johnson because he would never have gone with the Codex Astartes. Yeah, I mean, I think they definitely had to soften him. I mean, the thing is about the Lion softening is that, in a way, it's like a twist or whatever, but it's also really not. I don't know if other Dark Angels fans felt this. I always felt like this would be the case. I always felt like the Lion would be softened at some point in the future because he has a classic character arc, right? His character arc is he was this incredibly impressive, arrogant young man, and then he goes through a great humbling, but he comes out of it a much better man for it. That's a classic character arc, and to me that always seemed obvious, I guess, when you look at the Lion story in its entirety, right? Like it's very easy to dislike the Dark Angels in the Heresy, and it's very easy to dislike them in 40k, but together they become quite a likable force because they are this force of tremendous potential. They are this force that once was the best force in the galaxy, which is why everyone hates them in the Heresy, but now is this despicable, awful thing in 40k, which is why everyone hates them in 40k. But together, that's a pretty cool narrative, and it shows what the Dark Angels are capable of, and they could one day be that incredible united force that we hope them to be. I think that him avoiding the Codex Astartes is pretty much less of an issue because the Dark Angels never really followed it. So thanks so much, everybody. Take care. Hope you enjoyed this stream. Let me know what you think about the Lion returning in the comments, and I will see you all